Namaste. Welcome to our 13th talk on the Bhagavad Gita. We are ready for the 31st verse of the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. If someone keeps following my teaching with faith in their heart and do not make mental reservations, they will be released from the bondage of their karma. That part is quite astounding assurance of us. But one thing for sure is not saying those who don't do what I say are bad. They'll come to a bad end. No, no, no. He's just speaking quite logically and with knowledge of the way things work in this world. Because the teachings of Krishna are the teachings of infinity, the teachings of the great sages of India. They were ancient when Krishna was born. So they're not his in the sense of a personal thing, like, well, for the first time, the world is hearing the truth. This is a favorite ploy of false teachers. And Krishna is not one, so he's not saying that. But he's saying that if we follow the principles that are going to be given in the Gita and have been given already, some of them, with faith. Now, there's different kinds of faith. There's like, well, I don't know how it's going to come out, but I just believe God will see that everything comes out all right. Then there is a faith that is assurance. When you turn the key in the ignition of your car, you have the assurance that it's going to start up. That's a kind of faith too. It's a faith based on your own experience, and this is very important. A person should make all of their decisions based at least partially on their experiences. Naturally, they may listen to other people and their ideas. After all, there are wiser people than us. But this must be there. Also indicates there must be an assurance in a person who is really going toward higher consciousness. Now it says he doesn't make mental reservations. That is, he doesn't fudge. Like, well, but I don't quite have to do it that intense, do I? All right, I'll do that, but I won't do it now. I'll do it when I'm ready in a few weeks. Not on your life. It's now or never, because there never is anything but now. The past is gone. The future won't ever come as the future. Suddenly, it will be the present. So the people that aren't used to working in the here and now are not going to get very far. Also, do they want to get far? There are some people who fail because the prospect of success is very distasteful to them. If you succeed, well, then you might be obligated to do a certain thing as a result of that knowledge. If you don't want to practice medicine, you surely will not study medicine. So there are also those that somehow manage to miss the teaching, or, well, they don't read it. There are some people in my early yoga days in California that if anyone had read a book that was valuable spiritually, and they would say to them, oh, you read such and such a book. They say, oh no, I don't believe in buying things like that. I think they should come to you, meaning that God should drop it out of heaven because, after all, you are on the divine path. Instead of really meaning, I don't have any genuine respect for spiritual knowledge. I have no true interest in it. Therefore, I'm not going to even pay 25 cents for a book about it. That happens too. In other words, everybody knows how they think they are cheating God and they're cheating themselves. But they deserve that, don't they? So, if it is followed with assurance and no reservations, like it must be later, I'm not well. I've actually known people to say, well, I don't know if I should meditate because it might affect my heart. I mean, I've heard it, you understand. I knew a man, he came all the way from Norway to Hollywood to supposedly be a yogi. And he wouldn't do any of the practices because he said, oh, well, I have to be careful of my heart. There you are. So, what does it say about such people? Those who scorn my teaching, they're saying, like, oh, I think it's hooey. And there's like, again, well, I'm not so sure. Or then there's, I'm not ready, people. Whichever way, and do not follow it are lost. Now, not lost in the sense of, oh, they've gone to hell and they're lost in the fires of hell. I was raised with that stuff. There were two kinds of people in the world, the saved and the lost. Krishna, thank God, is not a fundamentalist Protestant evangelist. He means lost in the sense of not knowing the way. When you know your way, well, away you go. So those who don't follow the teachings, well, they don't know the way to follow. They don't know the way to walk. They don't know the way to live. They don't even know the way to think. So they are wandering. They are confused. And they are, in a sense, blind. And so they just simply stumble around in the dark or just walk aimlessly. Most people live that way. Most people's lives have virtually no spiritual order in it. They'll have all kinds of external order, but no spiritual order. Because he says they are without spiritual discrimination. They can't understand this will be good for me, this will not be good for me, this will be useless for me to do. In other words, you've got to have discrimination. Viveka is the word in Sanskrit, to be able to distinguish this is false, this is true, this is wise, this is foolish, this is beneficial, and this is harmful. Yes, friends, you have to be braced for the word judgmental. Oh my goodness. Yes. The people who don't like people being judgmental are the people that don't want to be seen as what they are, and then they don't want the word put upon what they are. All their knowledge, he says, is a delusion. And they often use their delusive knowledge to argue against the true knowledge. Unfortunately, but true. Even a wise man, next, this is very interesting here too. Even a wise man acts according to the tendencies of his own nature. The word for nature there is prakriti, which means energy, life force, life energy. So, as a person lives the spiritual life is as he is. So, foolish people do it foolishly. I've mentioned before, I think more than once, that one time a yogi was answering questions and someone said, well, meditation is beneficial and it helps to clarify the mind. So, would it be good to teach mental patients how to meditate? And he said, no, not under any circumstance, because crazy people do everything crazily. So if you teach them to meditate, they'll meditate in a crazy way and become even crazier. Therefore, we have to realize this. So, you, for example, Soham, Oh, never mind. I was going to tell you about a thing. All right. Um, I knew there's some schools of yoga that instead of Soham, they will say uh, Hamsa. That's not correct, and it also is detrimental because it's reversing the vibration of the inhalation and exhalation. And but I knew someone that taught a class, and he said, "Do that." And somebody came up in about 2 days, a very intelligent woman. In fact, she was an assistant professor at the university where he taught the class. And she said, "Now, what is this we're supposed to say? Wong Wu?" Well, it was Wong Wei, that's for sure. So the energies of our mind can either help us manage well or try to interfere. So we have to realize that happens also. All living creatures follow their tendencies. There's no use trying to get people to do what they're not going to do. People who care naturally think, well, if I could just persuade such and such a person to not do this negative thing or to do this positive thing, then things will be all right for them. And I don't mean that we shouldn't give good advice to people occasionally. But when it comes to these spiritual matters, if they don't show any kind of interest, then leave them alone because they will not do it correctly if you teach them. Or even more, they will argue against it and they'll come up with some of the most bizarre excuses. This is the voice of experience. All living creatures follow their tendencies. What use is any external restraint? Well, I mean, we know that we tie up a dog that wants to go and bark at people. And sometimes we do say to a child, go to your room. But other people, they're going to live their life or mess up their life as their desire goes. Let it be. There are people that use social action as an excuse to not look after themselves. They're busy making other people better. And I heard of a situation where a man who was really quite a qualified spiritual teacher uh, had taught a group of people, and one among them was just going completely off the rails. And one of the ways he was doing was he was getting involved in doing good and helping people and so on. And so, of course, he felt guilty about it. People like that often accuse you and say, you make me feel guilty. But anyway, he was feeling guilty. And when this teacher came one time and he saw him, he walked up to him and said to the teacher, "What are you doing to help the world?" The teacher said, "I'm keeping one person straight." That's a good answer. So Krishna continues, the attraction and aversion, raga and dvesha in Sanskrit, which the senses feel for different objects are natural. He doesn't say evil, bad, naughty, don't do, don't do. No. It's natural for you to have attraction to something and aversion to something. Sometimes to want and like something that's really not good for you, and to dislike and not want to have anything to do with something that is good for you. Okay, there it's natural. Now, a lot of people, if they say it's natural, oh, then it's good and we ought to do it. No, no. Krishna says then, but you must not give way to such feelings. They are obstacles. In other words, you don't say, I like, I dislike. You think this is positive, this is negative. This will assist me in my development. This will hinder me in my development. And that's the way a yogi should always think about it. According to yogic principles, will this enable me to be a better yogi or a worse yogi? Or eventually be not a yogi at all? And our whole life should be looked that way. Seriously. When a person wants, even at the beginning, if a person says, I want to be a yogi, what they already know about yoga and right and wrong and philosophy and right conduct, yama and niyama, they should then sit down and look at every aspect of their life, including all of their associations with other people, and say, does it help? Does it hinder? And only the things that help or just are neutral, do not hinder, that's what you keep in. The rest, get it out of your life and get them out of your life. This is absolutely essential. All right? Now, the question comes here of what we should do in our life, the way we should manage it, what we should value, what we should not value. And this is based on our karmas and some scars, that is, our developed tendencies or attractions and aversions that are according to past lives and that are according to the principles of right and wrong we know in this life. So he says, it is better to do your own duty, however imperfectly, than to assume the duties of another person, however successfully. In other words, if you ought to teach, then you shouldn't become a performer. If you ought to perform, you shouldn't teach. You have to live a way of life also. We've talked about, well, buckle up your belt, tie your shoelaces, and go down the road and do what you know is the right thing to do. Like, seize it, go on. And now here it's saying, but at the same time, look and see what is according to your own nature. Swabhava is the term in Sanskrit. You have swabhava, you have swadharma, the action that will reveal your divine self. The attitudes that will help you on to realize your divine self, you see. That you must follow. It's better to be a mediocre yogi than to not be one at all if you're supposed to be a yogi. But that doesn't mean you make that mental reservation and say, oh, well, I can just kind of work around the edges. I don't have to really jump right into the middle of it all. Oh, yes, you do. I can assure you. So it is better to do your own duty, however imperfectly, than to assume the duties of another person, however successfully. And there are people who do that. Hey, by the way, you know, there's this really good job and it pays a lot, and I become part of the team, and there's room for another one, and why don't you do that, and so on. Well, you don't say, oh, the money's good, and jump in. You ask, does it fit? Does it fit with my life? Does it fit with my psychology? Of course, does it fit with my karma? Prefer to die doing your own duty. In other words, die doing what you know is right, rather than live having compromised yourself. Because having made that habit in one life, it'll get stronger and stronger in other lives, to where you'll even automatically know what you should do. And the moment you hear it subconsciously, you've got an aversion. You say, oh, that's hooey, don't tell me that. And when will you find your way out of the maze? You see? This is a very, very serious thing. Yes, that was Timmy the timer telling me that I shouldn't take up more of your time, but we're right at the last verse. So it says, the duty of another will bring you into great spiritual danger. So doing what everybody else has always done in your family, or doing what people expect you to do, This is not the way. You must find your true spiritual way. There was a man who was uh, kind of a figure in Hollywood. I knew his daughter. He was miserable. He hated his life. He hated his children. He hated his wife. He hated the people he worked with. He never became anything more than associate producer. But you see, what it was is that he was a genius. And the kind of genius that when they're in school, especially junior high to high school, the stupid and the envious call him the brain. Do you remember that in school? Hey, brain. Yes, the jackass's brain. They weren't anybody of any consequence, but he wanted to be liked. And even more, he wanted to make them respect him, perhaps even envy him. So he figured he'd go to Hollywood and become a Hollywood mogul, and then they'd be sorry they called him the brain. So he went. He was only mediocre in these fields. His great field was physics. In fact, he made money and he gave fabulous amounts of money to different universities to subsidize scholarships for those that wanted to study physics, which he then had not done. And his life was hell. He chain smoked, his hands shook like this all the time. There was an argument I witnessed with his daughter. And by the way, she didn't even call him father. I had some Indian friends when I said, do you know Pam doesn't call her father father or her mother mother? She calls them by their first names. They said, no, that's not possible. You misunderstood. Because it was such a horrific idea to them coming from India, where the family means so much and respect for parents means so much, they wouldn't believe me. But anyway, she said to him, she asked me to go with her as a bodyguard, you see. She had to go to her parents' house. And she said, they will gang up on me, and especially they will bother me for practicing meditation and believing in Indian philosophy. So if you come along just out of their ego, they will not give me such a hard time. I said, all right, and I went along. And it was true. They didn't let their viciousness be seen by a stranger. But anyway, he was half sitting on the TV set and chain smoking. Okay, this will be my cigarette. And it was, okay. So she said to him, she gestured to their house and so on, which for her had been hell as she was growing up. And she said, Joe, what has all this ever done for you? He was furious. And he grabbed the head. He said, why, it's made me very happy. And she just kept quiet, which she should have done earlier. So it is, you see, he followed someone else, Swadharma, which would be a fine dharma if it was really for him. But it wasn't. So then, why do all these things happen? Krishna is going to ask about that. And we can talk about that then in number 14. Namaste.